Welcome, and thank you for joining Assessing Kitchen Fits for Your Food Business. My name is Michelle Bond, and I'm a CEI business advisor. At CEI, we work to help entrepreneurs grow and start their small businesses in Maine. We do this through informative workshops, multi-session peer groups, and one-on-one, no-cost business advising. To learn more about CEI, please visit our website at ceimaine.org. Today, we're going to talk about finding space for your food business, whether that's a kitchen, a prep area, a restaurant space, a food truck. Finding the right space can be tough. And so while there is no perfect space, we're going to talk about some of the considerations that you might want to think about as you look for a place to prepare your food in the state of Maine that is convenient, food safe, and ultimately can help you grow your business. Some of those include the cost, the efficiency, the ability for food safety, the logistics, what kind of equipment is available, and what's the opportunity to sell in that area or approximate to the area where you're making your food. There can be a lot to consider, and we know it can feel overwhelming. And we know sometimes it doesn't feel like there's a lot of space available, whether that's licensed big commercial kitchen space or even some smaller spaces in local towns or communities. And so regardless of the type of space that you're looking for and the area that you're in, we're just going to go through a few items that you can consider to help you figure out what might be the best fit for you. The first of those is, of course, the cost. What can you afford? Is your business already up and running? Do you have a sense of sales and what kind of a rent you can support? And how much space does that include? Does it include storage, prep area, use of equipment, access to parking and a loading area? These are all things that you want to think about as you're getting started. Even if you've been in business a while, every place is different. And once you start to know your process, you'll know what you really need. The lease structure. Many places are pretty casual. Maybe it's a month-to-month lease. Maybe the lease is negotiable, but that's something you want to get out in front of. Oftentimes, even if it's not negotiable, maybe you can ask about some of the things I mentioned earlier: parking, storage, use. Who else is going to be in the space with you? Are you going to be sharing it at a given time, or are there other people that use it at assigned times? And then how does that work for items that are being stored, whether it's prepped food in the refrigerator or dry items on a storage shelf? Those are all things that you want to know before you get into a situation. And a lot of times those are outlined in a lease. So you want to make sure that you know what you're getting into and that if there are things that you can advocate for yourself, that you've considered those as well. Entries and exits. It might not be something you're thinking about. If you're seeing a nice new shiny space, you might just be excited to get in there and start cooking. But think about how you're going to get your materials in there. Are you going to be accepting deliveries? Is there a ramp? Is there an entry wide enough for a cart? What's the access point to the nearest main road? Things like that. You just want to be aware of all of the different pieces of the logistics within that space and surrounding that space that will help you make that decision. And also customers. If you're going to be actually serving customers out of an establishment, whether it's an actual storefront or maybe just a prep area, a kind of ghost kitchen situation, will it be easy for them to get there? Will they have parking? Will they have accessibility needs? Those are things that you want to look for. Of course, the prep space and equipment. What kind of equipment do you need to make your product? Is there a set area for hotline, maybe under a hood that has ovens and grills and fryers and things like that? Or do you just need an approved licensed space where you can do some packaging, where you're making shelf-stable items and you just need to set them aside and get them out the door easily? Different types of spaces have different setups. Some have separate rooms for each of these types of operations. Others have everybody all in one big space, and it's up to the businesses that are in there to negotiate amongst themselves. There's no right or wrong, but there might be a right for you. And so you want to make sure that you know what you're getting into, again, in that regard. And essentially, most importantly, have the equipment that is most necessary to do your product or your product line. I myself made bagels. I absolutely needed a boiler. I need a big something to boil water in. You know, in my first kitchen, that was a tilt skillet. In the community kitchen I was in before that, it was several pots of boiling water on across two stoves. And that's where the space became really important to be able to make multiple things at the same time. So once you know your process, you know what's needed, that equipment becomes really important. Workflow and critical control points. What's your process? What do you make from start to finish? It's a good idea to lay out all of those steps and think about the types of ways that you're going to be moving around a space with each of those steps so that you can account for, oh, wow, if I have another person in me when I'm icing these cupcakes, there's not enough room for both of us to stand at this table in the corner. We're going to be bumping into each other every time we turn around to go to the mixer to get the rest of the icing. So think about the flow, not only for you, but if you have somebody in there helping you. And then the critical control points. If you're making something, if you're dealing with meat or fish or vegetable processing, there are certain amounts of time that these foods, according to whether you have a HACCP or just your own approved process, there are certain amounts of time that this food can be in certain places. And so depending on the setup of the kitchen, if your cold storage is way at the other end and you've got a lot of prep to do, you want to just make sure that the food that you're making is going to be safe and that's being factored into your decision making. Does this kitchen space have any common areas? You know, if it's a community center, maybe there's an area where the public is going to be coming in and out of. And how are you going to be sure that people aren't entering the actual prep space where you're making food to make sure it's as safe as possible? And if there are common areas, like do you have access to them? Can you use a computer or a printer, make copies or create a menu? Are those things important to you? Maybe you do all of that at home, but it's a good thing to think about what is included in your rent or in the type of way that the lease is designed. Location and sales opportunities. For some folks, you might just be looking to get started. You need a commercial space to be, you need to make food, and then you're going to have wholesale customers or you're going to sell directly to clients. You don't necessarily need a storefront walk up. So the location isn't as important. For others, you know, if you're a food business making prepared meals and you're relying on, you know, breakfast traffic and lunch traffic and dinner traffic, that consideration is going to be different. And I would just say that sometimes folks are starting out, maybe your ultimate goal is to have a cafe and you're making sandwiches and salads and selling coffee and you're doing some catering. Well, it would be great to have that perfect storefront right away. But maybe there's an advantage to working out of a place where you're preparing things and delivering on-site catering, where you can have special orders where customers can pick up. But you start to build that clientele before you put a lot of money down on a space that has high foot traffic, because often, obviously, that overhead is very expensive. And a lot of times in Maine, there's a struggle to find commercial spaces that are available. So you want to make sure that you're not shooting yourself in the foot by having kind of the perfect be the enemy of the good. And you can always work up to that. You know, on the other hand, if foot traffic is very important, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where, you know, you invest, even if it's not as much money in renting a space by an hour or by, you know, a week or a month and don't get that volume that you need. And then you don't really get a chance to test your product or your process. So, you know, just thinking about what kind of business that you want to be and what stage the business is at. Delivery access, I mentioned in regard to entry and exits. You want to make sure that you can get in and out of there easily. One of the kitchens that I was in, there was only one major delivery point and people coming in and out with multiple businesses, often at the same times, trying to sell at the same farmers markets, trying to do the same night markets, trying to, you know, sell breakfast on a Sunday morning. And people would get really bunched up in there, and we had to work that out amongst ourselves, you know, kind of who's there first and really communicate and be organized. And so none of these are deal breakers, but they are things that you want to think through in regard to how you make your food and then how and where you sell your food and when you're going to be able to get out there. Business support services, kind of like the common area question. Are there other programs or services that this kitchen space offers? Do they offer business mentorship? Do they offer a place to promote your goods? Do they offer administrative support or access to bookkeeping or to accountants or lawyers? They're just good questions to ask. It's not going to be a one-stop shop, but it could be the kind of thing where if the rent is a little higher, but these are services that you are looking for anyway, and you have them in a shared space, they might offset those costs a little bit. So it's something that you should think about. And then, of course, growth potential. Like I said, maybe you ultimately want to have a storefront, but you're not there yet. And starting in a kitchen where you're just prepping and fine-tuning your process and building your customer base is enough to get you started. But you want to be thinking down the line, what might I need in another 6 months or another year? And working through your process can help you then when you are ready to be in a kind of a prime time location, you have a better sense of what you need, and then you have a way to cost it out and to budget for it and to try to find the funds to support that. And you have some options, right? Like all of these are need to be commercially licensed. As a food business in Maine, you know that you have to go through the Department of Agriculture or Health and Human Services to get the appropriate license for the type of food that you're processing, whether that is serving prepared food or whether it is serving shelf-stable products. And so first and foremost, it needs to be a licensed facility, but there are different ways and different combinations that take place based on what you're selling. And so some of those are obviously working out of your home kitchen, a food truck, right? This gentleman in the photo here is working in that space. And sometimes food trucks are great because you have everything all in one place. Depending what you're making, you may or may not need to use an outside another kitchen as well. But it is a tight space, and in summer busy months, think about the number of people that are going to be in that space. Think about the workflow. All the same things apply. Logistics, efficiency, critical control points for food safety, entries and exits, right? It's just a smaller space that has all the applicable considerations as an actual physical commercially licensed place. So just keep those in mind. And then there are the community spaces. I got my business started in my house, grew it into a community center kitchen, grew it into a church kitchen, then a commercial kitchen, then a brick and mortar. So there are lots of steps on that journey. And as you grow, they fit you differently. And I would encourage you to look into churches. Many food pantries have commercial spaces that they might be willing to rent out. Elks Clubs, Lions, Veterans, many of these places have kitchens as well. So depending on your town, your local area, talk to people, see what's available, see what people might be willing to work out with you. A lot of these places do sit empty a lot of the time. So it might be a low cost way for you to find something that works for you, especially if you're just getting started. And then there's shared restaurant space. The idea of, a breakfast place might not be open in the afternoon and evening. Maybe if you're an evening food producer, that's a great opportunity for you, and vice versa. So the key things to remember there is, these are active environments where you're not going to be able to have like exclusive space or exclusive access to equipment, which might be fine depending on what you're making. But you want to be clear on when you're operating and, when you're prepping in relation to the business that you're sharing with. Make sure that you're clear on what the storage situation is, whether it's cold storage or dry storage. In my experience, you can never have enough storage. And so, again, try to get out ahead of that. A clear working agreement, even if it is, just a conversation, an email, something that says, okay, I'm going to agree to keep this place, neat and tidy and to honor food regulations and make sure that I clean and sanitize surfaces when I'm done. Your team is going to do the same. If we have a disagreement, what happens? If some ingredients go missing, what happens? I hate to, say that it's all negative. It's not, can be a wonderful experience, but just having some of these things in place ahead of time can help navigate that. And that's where the last point, if you if you, especially when you're sharing restaurant space, which can be tight in the back there, organization and communication is key, both ahead of time and whatever agreement you come up with, but then also on an ongoing basis. Hey, I noticed we left stuff over here. When I came in, it was moved, so I couldn't find it. People aren't necessarily stealing anything, but it might take you an extra hour to put your stuff back where you need to put it. And that's not time you allowed it in your processing. So you just want to make sure that wherever those pinch points are, as much as possible, that they can be, eliminated ahead of time. And if they do come up, that you have a process and a plan with whoever you're working with or whatever space you're sharing to come to an agreement that works for everyone. And so with that, just some tips for thinking about the spaces. I've kind of mentioned them throughout, but it's really important to make a list of priorities. What's non-negotiable to you? If you are a baker, you need an oven, right? If you need a three bay sink for washing, rinsing, and sanitizing. These are absolutely necessary for any business. Reach out to contacts and try to get your questions answered in advance. And this can be facility contacts. Who runs the Elks Club? What do they know about the space? What would they be willing to do? Can you get in there and look at it? And then your own personal and professional networks. Who knows of a space that's available? Who knows of another food producer who isn't fully using their space that you might be able to share the rent on? What would that look like? Really use your networks and an advanced communication to try to get some of those questions answered. Visit the kitchen. I don't care what pictures, I don't care what people say. You need to be there on the ground to see it with your own eyes, to think about your own process for making food, your own process for cleaning up afterwards, your own process for storing things, how you're going to communicate that maybe to other people that are working with you. In many cases, I know solopreneurs, it's just you, but what if you have your mom in there helping you out? What's her situation going to be? So get in there and put eyes on it if you can. Think about what you need right now and then what you need in maybe 3 to 6 months. This doesn't mean that spaces that won't serve you in 3 to 6 months don't make sense to get started in. Think about the cafe example that I gave. It might make sense to just get started, make sure you're licensed, get an approved space to be in, and then get going. Try to build your business, see what's working and what's not, tweak, iterate. For someone else who maybe has a more fine-tuned process, you really know what you need. 6 months, you're going to be feeling the pinch, and then you're going to have to look for a place all over again. Maybe you don't want to do that. So, think through where you are now and where you might be a little bit further down the line and what you'll need. And then what are the opportunities? Again, if you're just starting, especially being in a commercial space will allow you to fine tune your process. It'll allow you to work with commercial equipment, which is very different than working with home equipment. In good news, it works much faster. It's more consistent. It can withstand going in and out of the refrigerator a bunch of times. It can withstand checking on the oven and rotating items. So, it gives you a chance to really stress test what your business is capable of and test out new products and things like that. Also gives you a chance to train key people. Again, this might be just you. It might be a friend helping out. But if you get a solid process down and you can bring someone else into that process, then you're creating a standard operating procedure and something that can be put to paper that is only going to help you grow and scale more easily over time. It also allows you to establish relationships with vendors, who's delivering the items that you're ordering, or customers. If they're picking up something that's a special order, they begin to know you're there. You begin to create a brand and a name for yourself that's going to help you no matter where you go next, especially if you're not looking for that walk-up traffic right at the beginning. And of course, you want to think about the risks too. A lot of those are embedded in the considerations that we've talked about: workflow, food safety, sharing space, liability, access, logistical ease. You don't want to have a bunch of headaches that are hard to navigate. The whole point of branching out is to have your own space, even if it's a prep area at a designated few hours a week. It's the beginning to start to grow your business, and it's something that you want to be able to do with as much ease and flow as possible. And then just get started and adjust. Like I said, depending on what your timeline is, depending on where you are in your business, you can always adjust and take the learnings that you make from whatever stage and bring them into the next one. So I hope you found this information helpful today. Again, my name is Michelle Bond. I'm a business advisor with CEI. We have so many great workshops for you, both live and recorded. So I hope that you check them out at our website, ceiorg.maine. And yeah, if you found this useful, please share it with a friend and please sign up for something in the future. Thanks so much and have a great day.